The bank manager stopped flipping the pages. Not slowly. Not thoughtfully. He stopped mid-motion, as if someone had quietly turned off the world. The soft sound of the ceiling fan continued above them. A pen rolled off the counter and hit the floor. But the manager didn't move. He stared at the open passbook in his hands, his eyes fixed on a single line, his fingers suddenly tight around the edges like the paper might disappear if he loosened his grip. Across the counter, the woman shifted her weight. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone impatient. "It's just an old account. I don't even know why I brought it." The manager didn't answer. He slowly turned the passbook toward himself, leaned closer, and read the line again. Once. Twice. Then he looked up at her. Not with confusion. Not with boredom. With something far more unsettling. "Where," he asked quietly, "did you get this?" She frowned. "It was my father's. He passed away." The manager's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And this passbook," he continued, lowering his voice, "where was it kept?" She shrugged. "In a box with old papers. Honestly, I almost threw it away." That was when his face changed. Not shock. Not surprise. Recognition. The kind of look people get when they realize they're standing on something fragile and priceless. He closed the passbook carefully, too carefully, as if it were no longer paper but glass. "I need to make a call," he said. "It won't take long." He stood up. She watched him walk away, heels clicking against the marble floor, confusion beginning to crawl up her spine. This was not how the visit was supposed to go. She had come in expecting boredom, forms, waiting, maybe a polite rejection. Not this. Not the sudden stiffness in the air. Not the way nearby staff had gone quiet. Not the way the manager avoided her eyes as he spoke into the phone behind the glass partition. She glanced down at the passbook lying on the counter. It looked exactly how she remembered it. Faded blue cover. Worn corners. Her father's name printed in thin, old-fashioned letters. Worthless. That was the word she'd used. She remembered saying it out loud. "Why do you keep this junk? Nobody uses passbooks anymore. This is just clutter." She swallowed. Across the room, the manager ended his call. He didn't sit back down. Instead, he walked toward her slowly, his steps measured, controlled. His professional mask was still there, but something beneath it had shifted. He stopped at the counter. "Ma'am," he said, "how long did your father have this account?" She hesitated. "I don't know, a long time, I guess." "How long?" She exhaled. "Decades, since before I was born." The manager nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. "And during those decades," he asked, "did he ever mention this account to anyone?" She shook her head. "No, he barely talked about money at all." The manager pressed his lips together. "That's what I thought." Her pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the passbook back toward himself and opened it again. "May I?" he asked, though he was already flipping pages. She leaned forward instinctively, trying to see what had caught his attention. Rows of dates. Numbers written in neat, disciplined handwriting. Stamps layered over stamps. Nothing impressive. Nothing flashy. At least, not to her. She let out a short, awkward laugh. "Look, if there's nothing there, it's fine. I told you it's probably empty. He was never." "That's not true," the manager interrupted. She froze. He looked up at her again, his eyes steady. "Your father was very careful," he said. The word careful echoed strangely in the space between them. "What do you mean?" she asked. He tapped one specific entry with his finger. "This," he said, "is not how someone careless saves." She followed his finger. It was just a date. Just a number. Still, something about the way he was looking at it made her chest tighten. She straightened. Is there a balance or not? The manager closed the passbook again. "There is," he said. She waited. Seconds passed. "Okay," she said, forcing a smile. "So how much are we talking? A few thousand, maybe less?" He didn't smile back. "Before I answer that," he said slowly, "I need to ask you something." Her patience snapped. "Why is this so complicated? It's just an old account." The manager's expression hardened, not angrily but firmly. "No," he said, "it is." She opened her mouth to argue. He raised a hand. "Your father," he continued, "came to this bank longer than I've worked here, longer than my predecessor, longer than most of the systems we use today." Her throat went dry. "He never missed a deposit," the manager said. "Not once." She stared at him. "He never withdrew impulsively, never chased trends, never panicked." Her heart began to pound. "He planned," the manager said quietly, "for something very specific." A chill ran through her arms. "What?" she whispered. The manager hesitated. Then he said, "For the moment when someone would think this passbook didn't matter." Silence fell. The kind of silence that presses on your ears. She laughed again, but it came out brittle. "You're talking like this thing is some kind of secret." The manager met her eyes. "It is." Her smile faded. She glanced around the bank. Everything suddenly felt too bright, too open, too exposed. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, "if there's a problem, just tell me. I have things to do." The manager nodded once. "There's no problem," he said. Then, after a pause, "There's a responsibility." Her stomach dropped. "To whom?" she asked. "To your father," he replied. She swallowed hard. "He's gone," she said. The manager didn't disagree. "No," he said, "but what he left behind is." He slid the passbook back toward her. This time, she didn't pull it away. Her fingers hovered above it, as if unsure whether touching it might change something. "You almost threw this away," the manager said softly. She flinched. "Yes," she admitted, "I did." He nodded again. "You're not the first," he said, "and you won't be the last." Her voice came out small. "What happens now?" The manager inhaled slowly. "Now," he said, "we verify." "Verify what?" He looked at the passbook one last time. "That your father knew exactly what he was doing." A printer whirred somewhere behind them. A door clicked open and shut. Life in the bank continued. But for her, the room felt like it had narrowed to a single point. The passbook, her father's name, and a truth she hadn't expected to face. The manager straightened his posture, his professional tone returning, but his eyes still held that same gravity. "I'm going to ask you to sit down," he said. "And after that?" He paused. "After that," he said, "you're going to wish you hadn't called this worthless." Everyone called him simple. Not unkindly. Not cruelly. Just casually. He's old-fashioned. He doesn't understand how things work anymore. He's stuck in the past. They said it, the way people talk about furniture they plan to replace. Grandpa never argued. He never raised his voice. Never defended himself. Never corrected anyone. He would just smile faintly, nod once, and go back to whatever he was doing. Which was usually something quiet. Something slow. Something nobody else thought mattered. Every morning, without fail, Grandpa woke up before the sun. Not because he had somewhere to be, but because he always had. He sat at the small wooden table near the window, the same one he'd used for decades, and drank his tea exactly the same way. 2 sips, pause, 2 more. The cup was chipped along the rim, but he liked it that way. Said it reminded him to be careful. On the table sat a stack of papers tied neatly with string. Old utility bills. Receipts. Documents no one else had looked at in years. And always, always, at the bottom of the stack, wrapped in a thin cloth, was the passbook. He never left it out, never showed it off, never talked about it unless someone asked. And no one ever did. Because to everyone else, it was just a relic. A thing from a time before apps and cards and instant transfers. Something you forgot about until it got in the way. Grandpa noticed that too. He noticed everything. He noticed how his daughter sighed whenever he pulled the passbook out to check a line. How her eyes glazed over when he talked about dates. How she once actually laughed, when he told her he preferred writing things down. "Why bother?" she'd said. "It's all digital now." Grandpa had smiled then too. "Digital disappears," he replied gently. "Paper waits." She waved him off. That was Grandpa's place in the family. Quiet background noise. Predictable. Harmless. Easily ignored. At family gatherings, he sat at the edge of conversations, listening more than speaking. When someone asked him how he was doing, he answered honestly, but briefly. "Fine. Still breathing. Can't complain." When they stopped asking, he didn't mind. Because Grandpa wasn't living for attention. He was living for something else. Something much later. Every month, on the same day, Grandpa put on his worn brown jacket and walked to the bank. Not drove. Walked. Rain or heat. Good knees or bad. He said it helped him think. The bank staff changed over the years. New faces. New systems. New counters. But Grandpa stayed the same. He stood in line patiently, passbook in hand, waiting his turn like time itself owed him nothing. Some tellers rushed him. Some tried to talk him into switching to modern options. Some smiled politely and rolled their eyes the moment he turned away. Grandpa noticed all of it and said nothing. He let them think he didn't understand. He let them think he was slow. Because speed was never his advantage. Consistency was. At home, his daughter often complained. "Why do you even go there? It's a waste of time. You should let me handle these things." Grandpa shook his head. "This one," he said softly, tapping the passbook, "is mine." She frowned. "It's not like it's worth anything." Grandpa looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Value isn't loud." She didn't get it. No one did. When Grandpa got sick, things changed. Slowly at first. Then all at once. Doctor visits replaced bank visits. Pills replaced routines. The passbook stayed wrapped, untouched, sitting exactly where it always had. His daughter took over the house. Bills. Cleaning. Sorting. She began throwing things away. Old clothes. Old magazines. Old memories. She called it decluttering. Grandpa watched from his chair. He didn't stop her. Didn't protest when she tossed his papers into boxes. Didn't raise his voice when she picked up the passbook for the first time in years. She flipped through it quickly, unimpressed. "All this effort," she said, shaking her head. "For this." Grandpa's fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. "Put it back," he said. She sighed. "Why?" "Because," he replied, "it's not finished." She laughed. "It's a book, not a project." Grandpa said nothing more. But that night, after everyone had gone to bed, he pulled the passbook closer. Ran his thumb over the worn cover. Checked the last entry. Everything was where it should be. He closed it again. A week later, Grandpa called his daughter into the room. His voice was weaker now, but his eyes were sharp. "I want you to have this," he said, holding out the passbook. She hesitated. "Why?" she asked. "Because," he said, "one day you'll need proof." "Proof of what?" He smiled faintly. "That patience pays interest." She didn't understand. But she took it, and promptly forgot about it. After Grandpa passed, the house felt emptier than expected. Not because he was loud when he was alive, but because his absence removed something steady, something grounding. His daughter grieved in practical ways. Arrangements, paperwork, closets. She boxed up his belongings quickly. Too quickly. She didn't open the passbook again. Didn't read the entries. Didn't check the stamps. She tossed it into a box labeled old stuff. At one point, she almost threw the whole box away. Stopped only because something inside rattled. The passbook slid out and hit the floor. She stared at it for a moment, then sighed. "Still this thing," she muttered. She picked it up, meaning to toss it back into the box. Instead, she set it aside. Not because she cared, but because she was tired. Days later, something unrelated brought her to the bank. A routine errand. An inconvenience. She grabbed the passbook on impulse. Not out of respect. Out of curiosity. Or maybe irritation. "Let's just get this over with," she said to herself. She had no expectations. No hope. No idea. As she walked into the bank, the automatic doors sliding open, she didn't feel like she was stepping into a revelation. She felt like she was wasting time. She had no idea she was walking straight into the one place where Grandpa had never been underestimated. Not once. The bank chair felt colder than she expected. She sat stiffly, purse clutched on her lap, eyes drifting toward the glass partition where the manager had disappeared again. Around her, people tapped phones, whispered into calls, scrolled, sighed. Life moved fast here. Too fast. She glanced down at the passbook resting on her knees. For the first time, she opened it properly. Not flipping. Not skimming. Actually looking. The handwriting was neat. Too neat. Each entry aligned carefully with the one before it, like Grandpa had measured every letter before committing it to paper. Dates followed a rhythm, not random, not impulsive. She frowned. Had it always looked like this? She traced a finger down the page, noticing something she'd never paid attention to before. There were no gaps. No skipped months. No sudden splurges. No erratic withdrawals. Just steady deposits. Again. And again. And again. Her chest tightened. She thought of all the times she'd called him stubborn. All the times she'd told him he didn't understand how money works anymore. She swallowed. The bank manager returned and sat across from her, placing a folder on the desk but not opening it. "You're seeing it now," he said quietly. She looked up, seeing what? The pattern. She hesitated. "I don't know what I'm looking at." "That's all right," he said. "Most people don't, not at first." He slid the passbook toward her again, but this time he turned it slightly, angling it so the light caught the ink just right. "Read the dates out loud," he said. She blinked. "Why?" "Just try." She sighed, then pointed to the first visible entry. March 3rd. Next. April 3rd. Next. Her voice slowed. May 3rd. She stopped. The manager didn't say anything. She turned the page. June 3rd. Her breath caught. She flipped another page. July 3rd. Her fingers tightened around the cover. August 3rd, she whispered. She looked up at him. "It's always the same day." He nodded. "For decades." She felt something shift inside her, something uncomfortable. "He planned it," she said. "Yes." "Every month." "Yes." No matter what was happening. "Yes." Her mind raced backward. Doctor visits. Pain. Bad weather. Arguments. Loneliness. And still, every 3rd of the month, Grandpa walked to the bank. She laughed weakly. "I thought he was just set in his ways." The manager's voice softened. He was set on something. She turned another page, noticing smaller details now. The amounts changed, but carefully. Never too much. Never too little. Always intentional. Like he was building something brick by brick. I used to tell him to stop, she admitted suddenly. The words surprised even her. The manager waited. I told him he was wasting time, she continued. I told him he should enjoy his money, travel, buy things, live a little. She shook her head. He just smiled. The manager smiled too, but sadly. He was living, he said, just not loudly. She stared at the passbook. Memories began slipping and uninvited. Grandpa fixing things instead of replacing them. Grandpa reusing envelopes. Grandpa turning off lights no one else noticed were on. She'd called it cheap. She'd been wrong. You know, the manager said, leaning back slightly, most people save when they feel safe. She looked up. Your father saved when he felt uncertain. Her throat tightened. He lived through times when promises failed, the manager continued. When systems changed overnight, when security vanished without warning. She nodded slowly. He didn't trust convenience, the manager said. He trusted discipline. The word hit her harder than expected. Discipline. She thought of her own habits. Impulse purchases. Subscriptions she forgot about. Spending to cope. Grandpa never did that. Not because he couldn't. Because he wouldn't. She closed the passbook gently. I thought he didn't understand the world anymore, she said quietly. The manager looked at her steadily. He understood it very well, he replied. He just didn't talk about it. Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Heavy. She rubbed her hands together. Why didn't he tell me? She asked. The manager tilted his head. Would you have listened? The question landed softly, but it landed. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She pictured herself years earlier, rolling her eyes, glancing at her phone while Grandpa spoke. She exhaled shakily. No, she admitted. The manager nodded once. He knew that too. Her eyes burned. She pressed her lips together, fighting the sudden sting. He still trusted me with it, she said. Yes. Even knowing I didn't value it. Yes. Her voice broke. Why? The manager paused. Because this wasn't about money, he said. It was about timing. She frowned. Timing. He didn't want you to understand it then, he explained. He wanted you to understand it now. Her heart pounded. When? She asked. When you were ready to see the difference between noise and substance. She laughed through tears. I threw it in a box labeled old stuff. The manager didn't judge. He just said, most wisdom gets labeled that way. She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. I didn't even read it, she whispered. But you are now. She looked down again, flipping to the very first page. The date made her inhale sharply. It was from a time before she existed. Before her parents had stability. Before the house. Before the life she'd assumed was guaranteed. He started this before he had anything, she said. The manager nodded, and he never stopped once he did. That was when it hit her. This wasn't savings. This was belief. Belief in the future. Belief in responsibility. Belief that effort compounded quietly, even when no one applauded. She hugged the passbook to her chest. I feel stupid, she said. The manager's voice was gentle. You feel human. She laughed weakly. I used to think success was obvious, loud, fast. And now, she said slowly, I think it's invisible until it's finished. The manager smiled. That, he said, is exactly what your father counted on. She looked at him, heart racing again. So what happens next? He leaned forward slightly. Now, he said, we confirm something. Her stomach flipped. What? That every sacrifice he made arrived exactly where he intended. She swallowed. And where was that? The manager glanced at the passbook, then back at her. "Not in the past," he said, "but in your hands." She felt the weight of it then. Not just the book. The responsibility. The trust. The years of effort she'd almost thrown away without a second thought. Outside, sunlight filtered through the glass doors. People came and went, unaware. She took a steady breath. For the first time, she didn't feel impatient. She felt humbled. And somewhere deep inside, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel in a bank. Gratitude. The bank manager didn't open the folder right away. Instead, he stood up. That alone made her nervous. People didn't stand up for routine matters. He walked toward the glass wall and pulled the blinds halfway down, not enough to hide them completely, but enough to create distance from the rest of the bank. Privacy. Her pulse quickened. "This part," he said, returning to his chair, "is where most people misunderstand what's actually happening." She nodded, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I recognized your father's passbook the moment I saw it," he said. Her breath caught. "You knew him." "Yes," he replied, "but not the way you think." He opened the folder at last. Inside were copies of old documents, yellowed forms, handwritten notes, stamps from years ago. The kind of paperwork banks didn't keep unless there was a reason. "Your father wasn't just a customer," the manager said. "He was a reference." She blinked. "A reference." "For patience," he said quietly. "For consistency. For something we stopped seeing very often." He slid one paper toward her. It was a note. Short, neat, familiar handwriting. Her father's. She froze. "I asked him once," the manager continued, "why he never moved his money into higher-yield products, why he never chased growth." Her fingers trembled as she read the note. "Slow is safe, safe lasts." Tears blurred her vision. "He told me," the manager said, "that his goal wasn't to grow money, it was to grow certainty." She pressed her lips together, nodding. "Years ago," he continued, "the bank tried to close accounts like his, old style, low activity. Inefficient, they called them." Her heart thudded. "Your father came in that day," the manager said. "He didn't argue, he didn't complain." She could picture it. He just asked one question. The manager smiled faintly. "Will this still be here if my hands can't bring it anymore?" Her breath broke. "And we promised him it would be," the manager said. He leaned forward. "That promise matters." She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed but unable to stop. "So what's in it?" she asked softly. The manager didn't answer immediately. He turned the passbook one final time, ran his finger down to the very last stamped line. Then he turned it toward her. "Your father deposited money every month for 43 years, he said. Her eyes widened. "Not once," he continued, "did he miss a deposit." Her throat tightened painfully. "Not when he was healthy, not when he was sick, not when life was unfair." She whispered, "How?" "He adjusted," the manager replied. "He sacrificed." Her chest felt too small to hold everything rising inside it. "He skipped meals," the manager said gently. "Delayed comforts, repaired instead of replaced." She sobbed quietly now. "He chose future over present," the manager said. "Every time." He took a breath. "When the account matured," he said, "it did something rare." She looked up. It stopped being ordinary. He slid a final document across the desk. "Your father didn't leave you money," the manager said. "He left you independence." She stared at the paper. Numbers filled the page. Not absurdly flashy. Not unrealistic. But unmistakably life-changing. Her hands flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "This can't be." "It is," he said. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I thought he had nothing," she cried. "I thought he was struggling." The manager's voice was steady but kind. "He was building." Her shoulders shook. "I told him to stop," she said. "I told him he was wasting his life." The manager didn't interrupt. "I told him nobody cares about passbooks anymore," she continued through tears. "I told him this didn't matter." She covered her face. "And he never corrected me." The manager spoke softly. "He wasn't saving to prove you wrong." She looked up. "He was saving to make sure you were okay." The words broke something open inside her. Memories flooded back. Grandpa insisting she take leftovers. Grandpa refusing help. Grandpa saying, "I'm fine," even when he was. "He knew," she whispered. "Yes," the manager said. "He knew you. Underestimate him." She laughed through tears. "He knew I'd almost throw it away." The manager nodded. "And he planned for that too." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He pointed to a clause on the document. "Your father set conditions," he said. "The account couldn't be accessed automatically." Her heart raced. "It required a review," he continued. "A conversation, a pause." She inhaled sharply. "He didn't want this discovered casually," the manager said. "He wanted it discovered meaningfully." She stared at the passbook. "So if I had just ignored it completely?" The manager met her eyes. "Then it would have waited." Her breath hitched. "Paper waits," she whispered. He smiled. "That's what he told you, isn't it?" She nodded, tears streaming freely now. The room felt impossibly still. She imagined Grandpa sitting at his table, tying the string around his papers, trusting time, trusting discipline, trusting her, even when she didn't deserve it yet. "I was so wrong about him," she said. The manager shook his head. "You were early," he corrected gently. "Not wrong." She took a deep breath. "What do I do now?" she asked. The manager closed the folder. "You honor it," he said. "How?" "By remembering why it exists," he replied, "and by never calling quiet effort worthless again." She nodded. Outside, the blinds lifted slightly as the manager stood. The bank noise returned. Life resumed. But she stayed seated for a moment longer, holding the passbook like something alive. She hadn't just received money. She'd received proof. That patience works. That humility pays. That the people we overlook are often the ones holding everything together. As she stood to leave, she paused. "Thank you," she said. The manager smiled. "Thank your father," he replied. She walked out of the bank slowly. Not because she was tired, but because, for the first time, she understood the weight of what she carried. And somewhere, quietly, Grandpa had been right all along. She didn't open the envelope in the car. That surprised her. A few hours ago, she would have ripped it open without a second thought, heart racing, mind calculating, already planning what came next. But now she placed it gently in her bag, set the passbook beside it, and sat behind the steering wheel without turning the key. The bank doors slid shut behind her. People walked past. Cars honked. Life moved on. And yet, she felt like time had slowed, like she'd stepped out of a current she hadn't even known she was in. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. They were shaking. Not from excitement. From weight. She closed her eyes and saw Grandpa again, not the frail man near the end, not the quiet figure everyone ignored, but the steady presence he'd always been. Sitting by the window. Sipping tea. Tying string around papers no one cared about. Waiting. She whispered aloud, "I'm sorry." The words felt small, but they were real. At home, the house greeted her with silence. The same silence she'd once found comforting. Now it felt different. She set her bag down carefully. Didn't toss it. Didn't drop it. She placed the passbook on the table where Grandpa used to sit. For a moment, she just stared at it. It looked the same. Worn. Unimpressive. Quiet. But now she knew better. She walked through the house slowly, noticing things she'd rushed past 1,000 times before. The repaired chair leg. The reused jars. The light switches Grandpa always turned off. She used to see these as signs of limitation. Now she saw discipline. She stopped at the box in the corner, the one labeled old stuff. Her chest tightened. She opened it. Inside were remnants of a life she dismissed too quickly. Receipts. Notes. Envelopes with careful handwriting. She picked one up. It was a grocery list. Short, precise. No extras. She laughed softly through tears. "You were planning even here," she whispered. She sat on the floor, surrounded by the quiet proof of someone who had lived intentionally while everyone else rushed past. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because she was restless, but because her mind wouldn't stop replaying moments she'd misunderstood. Every time Grandpa had said, "I'm fine." Every time he'd refused help. Every time he'd smiled instead of explaining. He hadn't been proud. He'd been focused. Focused on something she wasn't ready to understand yet. In the early hours of the morning, she got up and made tea. She used his cup. 2 sips, pause, 2 more. It tasted the same. She opened the envelope at the table. Read it slowly. Not to count. To comprehend. She didn't cry this time. She just breathed. And something inside her settled. Days passed. Then weeks. She didn't tell anyone at first. Not because she was hiding it, but because she was still learning how to hold it. Money, she realized, wasn't the hard part. Meaning was. She went back to the bank one afternoon, not to withdraw, not to invest, but to ask questions. The manager smiled when he saw her. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," she replied. She asked about options, about responsibility, about how to honor something instead of just using it. The manager nodded. "Your father would approve of these questions," he said. At home, changes happened quietly. She stopped buying things she didn't need. Stopped upgrading just because she could. She fixed things. She planned. She paused. Friends noticed. "You've changed," one of them said. She smiled. "I was rushing before." They didn't understand. That was okay. She didn't need them to. One afternoon, she found herself at the old table again. The passbook lay open. She traced the dates with her finger. 3rd of every month. She looked at the calendar. It was the 3rd. Her throat tightened. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked. Not drove. Walked. The bank was farther than she remembered. Her legs ached halfway there. She almost laughed. "So this is what you did," she murmured. Inside the bank, the teller greeted her politely. She handed over the passbook. "I'd like to make a deposit," she said. The teller smiled. As the stamp came down on the page, something unexpected happened. Relief. Not because of the money, but because, for the first time, she wasn't breaking the chain. She was continuing it. That night, she dreamed of Grandpa. He didn't say anything. He just sat at the table, tying string around papers, glancing up once with that familiar, knowing smile. When she woke, her pillow was wet. Months later, she told the story. Not as a brag. As a warning. She told friends not to underestimate quiet people. Not to confuse simplicity with ignorance. Not to mistake patience for weakness. Some listened. Some didn't. That was okay too. Because Grandpa had taught her something else. You don't save to be believed. You save to be ready. On the anniversary of his passing, she visited the bank again. Not to deposit. Not to withdraw. Just to sit. She held the passbook and whispered, "You were right." Outside, the world rushed by. Inside, she felt steady. And somewhere, in the space between discipline and time, between patience and trust. The legacy Grandpa built continued doing exactly what it was always meant to do. Quietly, faithfully, waiting. The passbook felt heavier in her hands than it ever had. It wasn't the paper. It wasn't the ink. It was the weight of everything it represented. Decades, years, quiet decisions, trust. She stared at it as the bank manager returned, his steps measured, almost ceremonial, echoing faintly against the polished tiles. He stopped at the counter, his presence alone making her shift in her seat. There was a stillness about him, a calm authority that made the bustling bank feel irrelevant. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the passbook. She hesitated, unsure if handing it over would break some invisible rule. It wasn't hers to give, and yet it wasn't just hers. It was his and her father's, and maybe in some strange way now hers too. She placed it gently on the counter. He picked it up slowly, like someone holding a fragile bird. For a moment, he just stared at it. She held her breath. Then, slowly, he opened it. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Numbers, dates, stamps, faded handwriting, nothing remarkable, nothing to hint at the storm beneath the surface. But the way he looked at it told her everything she didn't yet know. His eyes narrowed slightly, lips pressed together, fingers brushing lightly across a line, pausing as if trying to memorize the rhythm. "Do you know what you're looking at?" he asked softly, almost rhetorically. She shook her head, unsure whether she wanted to know. "I've been in this bank for over 20 years, he continued, "and I've seen hundreds of accounts. Thousands, maybe. Most are transactional. People deposit, people withdraw, some forget, some spend impulsively. But this," he paused, letting the word hang in the air. "This is different." She leaned closer, curiosity battling unease. "Different how?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the passbook slightly toward the light. The pages glimmered faintly, revealing something almost imperceptible. "Do you see it?" he asked, tapping gently on the first page. She squinted. "See what?" "The pattern," he said. She blinked. "Pattern?" "Yes," he replied. "Your father didn't just deposit money. He didn't just trust the bank to hold it. He built it, every month, every year, with meticulous care, with discipline few people understand, and even fewer respect." She felt a shiver creep down her spine. She traced her fingers along the page. At first, it looked random, numbers, dates, small deposits here and there. But now, with his words echoing in her mind, she noticed something. The deposits weren't random. They had rhythm, precision, intent. Every third of the month, every month, for decades. She swallowed. I didn't realize." "Most people don't," the manager said gently. "They see a faded book, some old numbers, and dismiss it. Your father knew that. He counted on it. He wanted it to look ordinary. He wanted it to seem unimportant, so that when it mattered, only the right person would notice." Her heartbeat quickened. "You mean," she started. "Yes," he said. "He planned for you to doubt it, to almost throw it away, to underestimate it. That was the point." She felt the edges of panic creeping in. But why? Why would he do that? The manager leaned back slightly, steepling his fingers. "Because the lesson isn't in the money. The lesson is in the patience, the consistency, the foresight. He wanted you to learn it the hard way, and perhaps in your own time." Tears pricked her eyes. She didn't understand fully yet, but the weight of realization began pressing down. "He trusted that you'd see it," the manager continued, "and not just the numbers, but the story behind them." She looked down at the passbook again. The first page, the oldest page, was from years before she was born. She could almost imagine her father, young and focused, carefully entering numbers in perfect handwriting, every month, rain or shine, illness or fatigue. "Decades of work," she whispered, "all quiet." The manager nodded. "Exactly. Quiet, invisible, ordinary to the untrained eye, but life-changing to the person who understands." Her hands shook. She gripped the passbook tighter. I almost threw it away." He gave a small, knowing smile. That would have been the wrong time, but you're here now. That's what matters. She looked up, searching his eyes. Here now. Yes, he said, because the right person sees the right thing at the right moment. That's how your father built trust. That's how he secured the future. Not for attention, not for pride, for purpose, and for you. She swallowed hard. So, all these years, he planned for me to not understand. The manager's gaze softened. Precisely, and you see it now, that's what he wanted. Her chest tightened. She thought of every time she had rolled her eyes, every time she had dismissed his quiet habits, every time she had called him stubborn or outdated. And now she realized he had been smarter than anyone in the family had ever given him credit for. He trusted me, she whispered, even when I didn't trust him. The manager nodded solemnly. That's the power of quiet wisdom. That's the power of consistency. And that's the power of a person who understands what truly matters. She couldn't stop the tears. I failed him, she said softly. You didn't fail him, he replied firmly. You simply hadn't seen it yet, and now you do. That's enough. She looked at the passbook again, every line suddenly glowing with significance. She could feel decades of discipline, patience, and foresight emanating from it. Every number was a testament, every date a milestone of unwavering commitment. Her mind drifted back to his home, the tea rituals, the careful sorting of papers, the repaired chair legs, the tiny acts of discipline and love that she had mocked or ignored. All of it suddenly made sense. All of it had been preparation, quiet groundwork. And what happens now? She asked, voice trembling. The manager leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. Now you honor it, not just the money, not just the account, but the values, the lessons, the patience, the foresight. She nodded slowly, tears running freely. I think I understand. You will, he said softly, and you'll carry it forward. That's the real inheritance. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The bank continued around her, the beeps of registers, the murmurs of customers, but she felt removed from it all. She was in a bubble, in a quiet space between past and future, holding her father's legacy in her hands. Finally, she whispered, I won't forget. I promise I won't waste this. The manager's expression softened. I know you won't. That's exactly what he trusted you to do. Her gaze returned to the passbook. And in that instant, she understood. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about trust, discipline, patience, and quiet, unwavering foresight. She hugged the passbook gently to her chest. I understand now, she whispered. The manager stood, nodding. Good, because understanding is only the beginning. She took a deep, steady breath. And for the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of her father's vision. A weight she didn't want to set down. A responsibility she didn't want to hand off. Because she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Right at the moment when everything, finally, made sense. The house was quiet now, but the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was charged. Charged with decades of decisions, discipline, and foresight she hadn't recognized until that afternoon at the bank. The passbook sat on the kitchen table. Its worn blue cover had seen better days, but now every crease, every faded number, every small smudge of ink seemed like a heartbeat. A heartbeat she had almost ignored. She ran her fingers over it, slowly, reverently. Her mind wandered back to Grandpa's hands, slightly shaking but steady as he wrote every entry, every deposit, every careful note. Every month, for decades. She remembered the afternoons she had mocked him, rolling her eyes as he carefully aligned bills, complaining about how slow he was, how outdated his methods seemed. And now, sitting here, she realized how wrong she had been. The realization hit her hard. Not because of money. Not because of what the account contained. But because she had almost thrown away decades of trust, wisdom, and quiet preparation. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Every number, every date, every stamp told a story she had never been ready to read. It wasn't just an account. It was a lifetime of lessons. She remembered the bank manager's words. He wanted it to look ordinary, so that when it mattered, only the right person would notice. She realized now she was the right person. Her chest tightened, a lump formed in her throat. She thought of her own life, her impulsive decisions, the ways she had rushed through responsibilities, assuming everything would always be easy, the ways she had dismissed her father's quiet warnings and guidance. Tears welled in her eyes. And yet, there was something else. Something heavier. Responsibility. Because understanding this legacy was not the same as owning it. Owning it meant more than just keeping a passbook. Owning it meant living differently. She closed her eyes. She could hear Grandpa's voice in her mind, soft, deliberate, patient. Paper waits, time waits, but you must act when the moment is right. She opened her eyes again, staring at the passbook, and for the first time, she felt the weight of every sacrifice he had made. All the meals he had skipped, all the small luxuries he had denied himself, all the quiet nights spent reviewing entries no one would ever notice. She swallowed hard. "I understand now," she whispered. The realization made her knees ache, not from weakness, but from the gravity of what she had been given. She wasn't just inheriting money. She wasn't just inheriting a bank account. She was inheriting trust, discipline, and the proof that consistency and patience matter more than noise and flashiness. It was overwhelming. But she knew she couldn't keep this to herself. She picked up her phone. Not to check messages, not to scroll mindlessly, but to call someone who might understand, or at least someone who deserved to hear it. Her mother's number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the call button. The memory of old arguments and dismissive words came back. Her mother had never appreciated Grandpa's quiet habits. She had teased, dismissed, even thrown away his papers before. And yet, she was part of the story too. She pressed the call button. "Mom," she said, voice trembling. "Hey, honey," her mother replied, distracted, the usual hum of impatience in her tone. "Sit down," she said. "I need to tell you something about Dad, about the passbook, about everything." There was silence on the other end. "Then, I'm listening." She told her mother everything she had learned at the bank, slowly, carefully. About the deposits, about the consistency, about the lesson hidden beneath the numbers. About how Grandpa had trusted her, even when she hadn't trusted him. And when she finished, there was silence again. A long silence. Finally, her mother whispered, I didn't realize. I thought it was just paperwork, just old numbers." "It's more than that," she said softly. "It was everything he built for us, for the family, for me, and now it's up to us to honor it." Her mother's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, I was wrong, we were wrong." Tears streamed down both their faces. And for the first time, she felt a sense of unity she had never experienced before. A family, finally seeing the invisible work of someone who had quietly held everything together. The next day, she returned to the house and began sorting through Grandpa's things again. Not to discard, not to reorganize, to understand. Every notebook, every note, every little paper he had tucked away. She realized something profound. He hadn't wasted a single moment. Every action had purpose. Every habit, every decision, every tiny act of restraint had been intentional. She laughed quietly through tears. "I almost threw it all away," she murmured. But now she understood. It was never too late. She began taking steps to continue what Grandpa had started. She went back to the bank, deposited small amounts regularly, just like he had. She started planning, saving, and thinking long-term, not just for herself, but for her family. Every action was deliberate. Every choice had meaning. Her friends noticed the change. "You're different," one said. She smiled. "I'm paying attention now." Not to impress, not to prove anything. but because she finally understood the value of invisible effort. Weeks passed, months. She returned to the kitchen table one evening, the passbook open in front of her. She traced the lines carefully. And for the first time, she didn't see numbers. She saw a story. A story of patience, a story of discipline, a story of quiet heroism. She realized she had a choice now. She could let this legacy slip away into another generation, ignored and forgotten. Or she could carry it forward. She chose the latter. The next morning, she took the passbook and the carefully tied envelopes of notes and placed them in a new box labeled Family Legacy. Not just for herself. For her children, her nieces, nephews. For anyone who would need to see the proof that quiet work, patience, and foresight could change a life. And in that moment, she felt a presence behind her. Not physical, not spoken, but undeniable. Her father's calm, knowing presence. The same presence that had guided every careful deposit, every disciplined entry, every quiet act of preparation. And for the first time, she whispered aloud, "Thank you, I won't let you down." Outside, the world moved fast. People rushed. Phones buzzed. Notifications pinged endlessly. But inside that quiet house, she felt steady. Because now, she was part of something bigger than herself. Something enduring. Something invisible until it was finally seen. Something that had waited patiently for the right moment. And that moment was now. His sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the house. She sat at the kitchen table, the passbook open in front of her. Its worn edges, faded ink, and careful entries suddenly felt alive. Alive with decades of patience. Alive with discipline. Alive with love. It had been months since she first went to the bank, months since the realization hit her, months since she began to understand what Grandpa had left behind. And yet, every time she looked at it, it felt like the first time. Because the story wasn't over, not really. She reached for her phone and hesitated. Then she dialed a number she had avoided for years. Her childhood best friend, someone who had known her father, someone who had teased Grandpa with the rest of the neighborhood kids, who had laughed at his careful habits, but who would understand the gravity of what she now held in her hands. "Hey," the friend answered casually. "Can we meet?" she asked softly. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said, and for the first time in a long time, she meant it. She grabbed the carefully tied envelope of notes, the passbook, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier. She walked slowly, deliberately, feeling each step as though it were part of a ritual. When she arrived, her friend was waiting, curious. She handed over the passbook. "I want you to see something," she said. And then slowly, carefully, she told the story, every detail. Grandpa's discipline, his quiet habits, the sacrifices no one had noticed, the deposits every third of the month, the decades of foresight. Her friend's eyes widened, mouth opening and closing, but no words came. This is incredible," they finally said. "Yes," she replied, tears brimming. "And the best part, we almost didn't see it, almost threw it away." Her voice cracked. "We underestimated him, all of us." Her friend nodded slowly. That's a lesson, isn't it?" She looked down at the passbook. "More than a lesson, it's proof. Proof that quiet effort, consistency, and patience matter more than anything else." Her friend leaned closer, eyes shining. "And the money?" She shook her head. "The money is just a part. The real inheritance is everything else. The way he thought, the way he lived, the way he trusted that someone would see it in time." Her hands trembled as she held the passbook. She could feel Grandpa's presence in the quiet of the room, in the subtle weight of each page, in the faint smell of old paper and ink. And then something unexpected happened. The bank manager called. "May I speak with you?" he asked over the phone. "Yes," she said, almost breathless. "I just wanted to let you know," he said, voice calm but firm, "that we've verified everything. Every deposit, every entry, your father's planning, it worked perfectly. You're standing exactly where he intended. Her heart pounded. Exactly where he intended. Yes, he said, and I think he would be proud of what you've done since, carrying it forward, understanding it, learning from it. She swallowed hard. I hope I can honor him properly. You already have, he replied, and that's the greatest reward. She hung up the phone, overwhelmed by emotion. Then she looked around her house. The repaired chairs, the reused jars, the lights he always turned off, the notes tucked in drawers no one would ever open. Every small act of quiet care suddenly felt monumental. She realized something profound. Grandpa had not only built a future for her, he had built a lesson for life. And now it was her turn. She began to make changes, small at first, not flashy, not for anyone else to notice, but deliberate, thoughtful. She started budgeting carefully, not for luxury, but for purpose. She repaired things instead of discarding them. She documented small decisions, careful notes, little reminders, small habits that might seem insignificant to others. Every action she took felt like a tribute, a continuation of Grandpa's quiet legacy. Weeks passed, then months. The neighborhood began to notice subtle changes. Her friends noticed too. You're different, someone said one day. She smiled softly. I'm paying attention now. But the greatest change was inside her. She was calmer, patient, thoughtful, able to pause and think before acting, able to see value in the things most people ignored. And then one day, something happened that made her heart stop. She was cleaning the attic when she found an old envelope she hadn't seen before. It was hidden, tucked behind boxes she had never opened. She opened it. Inside were letters, from Grandpa, written to her. Decades-old notes she hadn't known existed. Each letter was short, but each contained wisdom. Trust the quiet. It carries the heaviest weight. Discipline is invisible, but it moves mountains. The world will underestimate you. Let them. Keep your focus. She felt tears streaming down her face. And then the final note, in his familiar handwriting. By the time you read this, you'll understand. And when you do, you'll carry it forward better than I ever could. Her hands shook as she held the letter. She looked around the empty attic and whispered, I will, I promise. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It felt like Grandpa was there with her, watching, smiling, silent but proud. She realized then, fully, what the true inheritance was. Not money, not a bank account, but trust, wisdom, patience, and the knowledge that quiet, consistent effort always pays off, even when the world doubts you, even when the moment seems invisible, even when you're underestimated. And in that realization, she felt something else. Karma. Not revenge, not punishment. Justice, the kind that is measured in years of quiet effort and revealed in the perfect moment. She smiled through tears. Because the moment had come. The moment Grandpa had always intended. And now she was ready. The next morning, she returned to the bank. This time, not as a hesitant daughter, not as someone uncertain or doubtful. She walked in with purpose. She placed the passbook on the counter, opened to the latest entry, and said calmly, I want to continue this. The teller looked up, surprised. Continue. Yes, she said, exactly as it was done before. Every third of the month, every entry, every detail, I want it preserved. I want it respected. I want it honored. The bank manager appeared, smiling softly. You're ready, he said. I am, she replied. She could feel it. The weight of decades of silent effort, of trust, now in her hands, fully understood. The bank manager nodded. He would be proud. And she knew he was. Not because of the money. Not because of recognition. But because she had finally seen, understood, trusted, carried forward the legacy he built quietly, patiently, and perfectly. And that was worth more than anything the world could measure. Because some things are bigger than numbers, bigger than time, bigger than noise. Some things are invisible. Until they're not. She walked out of the bank, holding the passbook tightly. The sun was high now, warm on her face. She knew the world was still rushing by, still impatient, still dismissive. But she was. And in that quiet strength, in that deliberate step forward, she realized the greatest lesson of all. Patience pays. Quiet effort changes everything. And the people we underestimate are often the ones shaping the future. She smiled. Finally. Because Grandpa had been right all along. And now, she would make sure everyone else saw it too.